Members, could I ask you to take your seats, please? Members, could I just ask before I open the meeting that any of you that's in attendance with an electronic device to mute it to avoid feedback, please. And could I ask any remote participants to keep their camera and microphone off unless they wish to speak, and ideally not to use their camera facility at all, as this can affect the quality of the IT connection. Please note the meeting will be recorded, and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their Swilborough Council or Kent County Council laptop to participate virtually. If you join using a link on the website or on a mobile or tablet device, it is not possible to identify you, and you will not be recorded as being in remote attendance. Members, can I ask that you speak clearly into your microphones and please switch them off after speaking, otherwise remote participants may not be unable to hear the next speaker. So welcome everyone to this Policy and Resources Committee meeting, including all of our members, any visiting members attending remotely, and any members of the public likewise. Could I first of all welcome our Chief Executive, Director of Resources, our Director of Regeneration and Neighbourhoods, who's joining us remotely, Head of Revenues and Benefits, our Head of Shared Service, Head of Environment and Leisure, who again is joining us remotely, and our Head of Place, who is joining us remotely. Our Monitoring Officer, Enterprise Risk and Resilience Manager, Community Services Manager and Democratic Services Officer. There is no fire drill planned this evening, and I think everybody is probably more well versed with the procedures than I am. So if you'll indulge me, I'll give that one a miss. The only thing I will say is just remember not to use the lifts. Are there any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't received any apologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, can I ask for your approval of the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of November 2024, minute numbers 395 to 418, please? Councillor Baldock, please.
Sorry, Chair, there is another place to ask this. So 4025 about the conservation area character appraisal and management strategy, another public consultation. Can we have an update on whether or not that consultation has been held and has it been successful?
Joanne, online, are you able to help us with that one, please?
Thank you, Chair. I will have to take that away and speak to Jamil and they get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Speed.
Sorry, I was looking at my phone and I wasn't listening to you properly. Were you referring to Cellar Hill?
I guess you were turning it off.
Oh, of course, yes. Was it Cellar Hill Conservation Area?
It was the extra bit that we asked for at the last Policy and Resources, Chair.
So, sorry? The extra bit. It was Cellar Hill?
Yeah.
Okay, the consultation will be in March or April and it'll come back to PNR in June.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Members, are there any declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to item 5, which is the final budget, 25-26. And I'll ask our officer to introduce the report, please.
Thank you. So this report details the final budget proposals for the administration, and it builds on the draft budget that was published in November. It's been updated to reflect the financial settlement, the details of which are explained in paragraph 2.3 on page 6. And the changes as a result of the administration's changes to the budget are detailed on page 10, paragraph 3.4. All appendices have been updated to reflect the changes that have been mentioned there. There is also the appendix to show the consultation responses. No changes have resulted from the responses received. We received 18 responses, which is an improvement on the 12 that we received last year. The fees and charges are the principles as detailed in the draft budget, with no proposed changes to that position. With regards to the parishes, as you'll see from the appendix, there are still some missing, and they haven't been updated actually since the agenda was published. I've been advised by the parishes that one is meeting on Friday to confirm their budget, so I will have those figures for the final budget to resolution for council, but the other meeting is not being held until after the deadline for the publication of the papers. So I will have to table an update to the council agenda when I've received all of the council tax precepts from parishes, because that does form part of the council tax resolution that we have to agree on. You have to agree on the night. One of the other papers is the confirmation of the tax base that was published in December. That takes account of a slight loss in collection rates that we are building in as a result of the loss of the grant funding from KCC, which is still in their budget proposals as things stand. And also there is my Section 25 statement, which accompanies the budget papers that will be taken for consideration at the budget meeting in a couple of weeks' time. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Boyne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as I did last year, I'm happy to say to forward this to full council, to recommend this to full council. That doesn't mean to say that I accept what's in here, but for the purposes of business, I'm happy to do that. But I've got a couple of questions and a suggestion, if I may, as well. As a comment, so given also the news this afternoon and what may yet to still be the case, and again, this will be repeated at full council, but I think it would be unwise to look to spend on the virtue that we may not exist at some point in the relative near future, not as immediate as it once or was probably about 6 hours ago, but we do have a responsibility there. My questions in terms of the fees and charges, do you have any timescales as to when the review will be done? I did have it noted down somewhere. Where is it? I was looking at it about a minute ago. About a comprehensive review of the fees and charges. There it is. 8.13, a more comprehensive review will take place to ensure that we are covering our costs where appropriate. Is that plan, will that be done by next year?
It is kind of done as part of the process as well now. So the comprehensive review of those where we are cost recovery forms part of the process generally.
Okay. Thank you. The other area which I think we need to be, or a couple of bits, obviously the cost for the hearing, Highstead Valley, is going to have an impact, I presume, next year, that wasn't within our control, sadly. And if it's in here, I apologise, I've not been able to find it. I go number blind at times, think, okay, where is it? The figures for any penalty fees or costs which we've incurred back from Suez for the waste contracts, do we have that? And my last one for now, and this is the intention, is to try and hopefully speed up at the full council meeting, rather than make an amendment or suggest an amendment tonight. I would like to suggest, and the same as last year, one area which I picked up last year, it was on the pitch fees for children and mini football. It is a small, and I'm talking to Lisa, we're looking, I think, hundreds of pounds. It is not a bank-breaking area of the council business. So I would like to suggest that when we go to full council that we can, I'll be tabling an amendment to make that actually, that those costs should be either free or zero cost to hire for those pitches, or certainly not increased for this year. But we're not talking a huge amount of money here. I'm hoping that could get general support across this committee as a sort of an advance notice of one thing which I think we really should be doing to promote health and well-being certainly within our youngsters. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Shall I come back? Well, there was a couple of
Sorry, I do
questions
apologise.
there. So the budget reflects some provision for the local plan and hoisted costs, as you will recall from the urgent decisions meeting. The amounts are commercially sensitive, so they are included within the reports, but we are not reporting them separately. Yeah, don't quite know how to. Yeah, I was hoping no one was going to ask that. The sewers penalties, I think, as explained when we did the budget monitoring report in November, the penalties will be going into reserves to forward fund some of the proposals in the budget and to assess the waste position moving forward. So it's within the forecast, but it's to go into reserves. So it's a nil impact on the budget and on the budget monitoring. And the pitch fees, that was a comment, that wasn't anything for me, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. Exactly the same as Councillor Bowe, I'm very happy to propose that this goes forward to full council with the caveat that we don't agree with it all, and we'll certainly have our suggestions to make on the night. My question is around the consultation. Whilst a 50% increase is a very impressive KPI, it is still 0.03% of our taxpayers. So what did we do, and what could we do better to break the elusive 0.5% or even 1% return rate on that survey? Thank you.
So we advise all of our parish councils, and Janet and the chairs of all of the area committees raised it there. It's publicised on our website and our social media through the comms team. It's just people don't respond.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer, please.
Thank you. I'm just looking at 3.4 on page 10. I'm looking at the increased national insurance contributions. I thought the government had made a commitment that councils will get all the national insurance increases back. I'm just a bit concerned, just a bit confused to why that's in there. And the playground reduction, it would be nice to know on the budget what is actually going to be reduced, because we're being asked to make a decision and we don't have the full facts of what's going to be withdrawn, because again it seems to be a lot of young people might be suffering. They've suffered with cuts from KCC. Are they going to now start to suffer with cuts from this council? Thank you.
So the national insurance, the government said that the public sector costs would be covered. The announcements were made yesterday, and we need to work through the grant allocation, but it's not going to cover our costs, not going to cover anyone's costs. So we have got a gap on that, unfortunately. So that needs to be dealt with. And the playgrounds proposal is a target at the moment, so that it will be subject to consultation and review as part of the working through if the proposal is agreed. That's not actually specific at the moment. It will then be worked up into proposals of where we are, but we have got 78 playgrounds across the district.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The actual recommendation is to recommend to Council they approve the administration's revenue budget. I can't vote to recommend full Council approve that. Now, I know that the other two group leaders have said they will support it for the purpose of business, but we are in a very different position this year. We have an administration that has a minority administration but doesn't have a majority to force its budget through. We know that there will be changes that have to be made to this budget. I don't think trying to sort them all out on budget night is the best way to go about this. You'll have, oh, what happens if that amendment passes? Will this amendment not pass? Is that amendment using the same pot of money as this amendment? Can we take money out of something else to pay for that then, seeing as that's already gone through? But the sort of normal rigmarole we have at budgets, tenfold, because this time there will need to be changes in order to get it through. So I think this administration needs to listen and think about what it's doing before budget night. Otherwise, we're going to be here a long time with very complicated trying to sit on the hoof. Oh God, if we support this, does that mean we can't support this one later on? So I think there is a serious problem this year, and it would be good to resolve as much of it beforehand as possible. Since the budget went out for draft consultation in November, the figures on page 10 show we've actually increased the amount that's coming in over what we expected. The gap has closed. So under those circumstances, why are we cancelling so many important projects? Now, we may or may not be here in 2 years, we probably won't be here in 3 years. We need to be looking at building our community resilience. That's after it, that's afterwards. So things like getting rid of the loneliness project, the playgrounds we've got, the place work, remembers grants. These things are all unnecessary to fit in with the budget that went out for consultation in 2024. So why are we doing it? I can't possibly recommend this. I think this needs to be a second look, a third look. I think we need to have a proper consultation with all the groups before budget night so that we can get something we might be close to agreeing. At the moment, I know all the different groups are putting in different amendments. Some of those amendments might overlap. Some might clash. It'll be an absolute mess on the night trying to work out which amendment comes first or which amendment gets priority over another one. So I think we should have that discussion first. So that's why I can't recommend full council approve this budget as we were asked to do. I think it's a budget we know won't get passed, and we need to do the work on it beforehand, not last minute, because by doing it beforehand we might actually get a smoother, more efficient budget than the piecemeal result that we'll get from a frantic night.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, please.
I think councillors have had it much too easy, Mr. Chairman, frankly, because back in the day we were here half the night discussing, adjourning, talking in side rooms in order to get a budget through when there were no overall control, but we managed it because we were adults, we were talking to each other. So actually I don't really see a problem. I was going to say something on the consultation for the benefit of Mr. Gibson, also back in the day. When we first had to go out to consultation on the budget, and we did have a bit of, quite a bit of dosh actually in the bank, we employed a consultant. And we got a very high percentage return because they physically went out and stopped you in the street and asked you. That is the way to do it, because by and large, residents aren't interested unless and until it affects them. They elect councillors to get on with the job, and they expect them to get on with the job, and not sting them too much in doing so. So, you know, unless and until we are going to pay somebody again to do it, that is the result. You know, unless there's a big issue, the residents expect us to just get on with it. To be frank, I would say as long as their rubbish gets collected. But, you know, we had a problem with that, didn't we? But no, that is the answer. And they were very good. They were from north of Watford, and they asked the same question 16 different ways to Christmas. And residents want a full-blown museum in Sheerness. But they wouldn't attend it, they wouldn't go there, but they think that because Sheerness was big enough, we should have a full-blown museum. And it was stuff like that, perceptions, and you just think, well, you know, if we had a bottomless pit, I'm not sure even then I would spend money on stuff just for the sake of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. I can't say this too often now, that I agree with Councillor Baldock. That it does make a lot more sense to be discussing these things before you get to a meeting and start going all over the place and going over probably 3 nights and backwards and forwards. And if you can, if there is any opportunity to sit down beforehand, try and come up with something that actually works, because we know that there's no chance it's going to work on the night. It does make a lot more sense. With what we've got in front of us, the main, we've got the savings on 3.4, but actually when we look at it, we've actually got no savings at all, because we're still using 416,000 from reserves, and I assume that what is looked at when this is done is that we don't use anything at all from reserves, and that's what we keep being told. We shouldn't be using anything from reserves. When we take the figure of the local plan of 582,000, that's more than what we're taking from reserves. We've got a government grant of 1.3 million. And if we didn't have that, we'd be in a right mess, because we're, even though we've got 1.3 million, we're still 1.1 million down. So that shows that we haven't actually saved anything at all that's come forward. Even though we have got some savings in there that we're looking at not doing. So it's obviously been looked at of not using the reserves, and it just would be good to know if any other suggestions have come forward from officers to how we reduce that 416,000 down. Is there anything else that has come forward that has been rejected before we got to this point?
That information has been shared with group leaders.
If I can come back, Chair, maybe it has, but I'm asking in this meeting now. I don't know. I don't think it would be information that couldn't be shared with everybody.
I haven't got them to hand. So this list is also prior to the adjustments that have been built into this budget. So the changes, it doesn't reflect changes from what was agreed, what was put forward in November, to what was potentially been taken out of this budget. So I will read through the list. Do you only want things that haven't been accepted? Yeah.
Surely, if there's not things that have not been accepted, then they've been accepted and are already shown.
Yeah.
That'd be the case. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So there are an array of homelessness savings that at the moment have been parked until we assess the proposed structure changes that are in Charlotte's team working for the current year. So there's potentially some savings there. If the interventions deliver ongoing savings costs, then there are things. So it's housing benefit additions, visiting officers savings, and oh God, I wasn't supposed to say post. So I'm going to if there are specific posts, I'm going to say staffing areas and some other staffing reductions. Remember what's in the papers? We have got some further proposals to cut funding for stop funding for things like our other charity work that's not already been accepted. Again, I'm not being specific with the areas, it's just the general overview. Sorry, but this is really badly narrated. I apologise. To completely assess the work of some of the areas within Charlotte's area that is not statutory. Reviewing our customer access areas. Cutting the tea and coffee budget for this building. Removing some of the learning and skills budget within economic development that's not related to posts. Further reduction of conservation and design. Oh, you had your head in your hands then, Mike. You did it. I saw you out the corner of my eye. Not far. Again, removing some staffing area in planning. Restructure of environmental services. Removal of black sack provision. Charging for food waste bins. That's it. So they're the savings that were put forward that aren't necessarily reflected in the current. Yeah, so these were possible savings that were rejected as part of the budget bill process.
That's helpful to know. There's looking at those sorts of things, we're still, even with savings that we could be looking at, we're still probably nowhere near getting savings of 416,000.
No, but what my Section 25 and the use of some use of reserves is acceptable. So I don't think we would ever get it down to zero in areas that I've worked in before. There's been some reliance on reserves within the budget. So, but when it's topping 500,000 and above, then I think that's when we then have to really consider the level of saving. We have got, as my Section 25 statement says, we have got to find a savings plan.
Perfect. Thank you.
If we were to be in Section 114 territory, and which we're not, but if we were, then the commissioners would come in and look at everything that's not statutory, and there are a number of things that we haven't put forward because we absolutely know there is no political appetite to go forward with them. But in the event that we do run out of money, that is the only option that's left open to us. So there has been mind paid by heads of service. None of the heads of service wanted to put anything forward because it's all stuff that people find useful and helpful and makes us what we are. However, that stuff, but there would be more, but it's fundamentally stopping doing a number of things which we know from conversations that heads of service and directors and myself have had with different group leaders would not be acceptable to them, and therefore that's why we've tried to have that balance.
Thank you. Councillor Wise, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think having all group leaders discussion around this is obviously sensible. I mean, I wouldn't want to discourage any efforts to get the broadest sorts of consensus that we can around this. And if the government is still intending, which I hope they are, to give us a multi-year settlement next year, even if that's just a 2-year settlement, then I think that's also another opportunity then to really ensure that we have the council on as strong and sustainable financial footing as possible, given the other areas that will be of major strategic significance for the area around reorganisation, devolution opportunities and such. And again, those would also, I would like to see efforts where we can get as broad as possible consensus across the groups in the best interests of our residents. So, you know, this, whilst there is this budget, which the timings around the administration changes do make this a challenge, but there are large chunks of it that were going out to consultation with a broader around level of support. I think we do have a foundation here on which hopefully we can all work together to get something that we are content with. The question I also had, though, separate to that, is around the parish precepts in Appendix 5. Obviously, there's a couple of them that are to be confirmed. Have we had those since these papers were published? Or if we don't, when do they have to let us know by?
I covered that in my opening introduction, that they have to be part of the council tax resolution that you approve at full council. One council is meeting on Friday, so if I get that Friday afternoon, I will have it in time for the budget papers to be published. One of them has sent me the details that says it's unchanged from last year, and it's not the same figure as last year, so I've had to go back. We're having quite trouble trying to get hold of them. I've got pins and needles. And the third one are not meeting until next Thursday. And so they apparently have already met and they can't agree a budget. So we advised them today that if they don't give us one by the time that we have to agree the council tax, it will have to go in as 0. And they're not very happy about that, but they said it will come back. So I'll have to do a tabled update. So, but it does affect the whole council tax resolution because the total resolution includes parish precepts. I will be able to do the bit that affects us and the major preceptors, but the overall resolution I will have to table afterwards. I will do it as soon as I possibly can after I've got that last one in. But it won't affect our own budget position. It will just affect the council tax resolution for the whole district. It's really disappointing, and I don't like to be having to do things in a rush, but fingers crossed we will have it for final council, because if we don't, I don't really know what happens next.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple of things then. If we delay, or if we don't approve this recommendation tonight, we have to have another emergency P&R within the next 5 days, I think, in order that we can use the alternative budget date of, I think it's the 12th of February. That can't be right, that's too soon. It's a Monday, yeah. It actually clashes with my quiz night, so wouldn't be happy. But so if we don't approve it tonight, it will put the pressure on the administration to have those discussions that Councillor Wise has mentioned and that we've talked about, so that we can get something that might be more workable, more proposable. I mean, it's not difficult to work out where our group differs from, because we agreed the consultation. So it's really some of the items on page 10 that came out after we left after we were thrown out of the coalition. So that's where our disagreements mainly are. But from the perspective of the other opposition groups, there are a whole range of potential choices that could have been made in this budget. The administration, as it was, put forward the draft budget based on our priorities at the time, based on what we thought was appropriate. And listening to Councillor Hunt, if they want to go for even further cuts and try and take nothing from reserves, then there are other options that we looked at and dismissed. not saying you get much agreement on them, but there is a lot more in this budget and a lot more choices that could be made than what we have on the table in the draft budget and the changes on page 10. So, yeah, it's a lot of work in a short bit of time, but as I say, there are a lot of decisions being made that you might want to do differently. So that's why I would not approve this and see if we can get something better going forward.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Harrison and Councillor Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to repeat what I said earlier, but I don't see a problem going forward with this tonight. But there are times in the year where you think, yeah, why don't we say something about that? And this, Larissa raised the issue of statutory, non-statutory. And I think to myself, why do we keep saying, yeah, that's non-statutory, but we really want it? Why don't we write to government and say, look, this is non-statutory, why can't you make it statutory? And of course, what I'm talking about is planning enforcement. That would be going out the window if the commissioners come in. But that, in my view, that is absolutely vital. And I still fail to see why it isn't statutory. If planning is statutory, then planning enforcement should be statutory. So I just thought I'd flag up that, sometimes in the midst of all these discussions, we should take something positive out of it and say, yeah, actually, we're not going to discuss that anymore. We're going to actually write to the LGA, the DCN, we're not in the CCM, but all of the groups, and say, is this an issue elsewhere in the country? Can we lobby government to change it? So I just thought I would flag that up as non-statutory stuff has been mentioned. And I thought there was another suggestion from another group prior to the changes that that they wanted to put forward as a save-in that Lisa didn't mention, or have I missed something somewhere? Because to be honest, I do support Councillor Hunt's views that we should be looking at taking nothing out of the reserves, but then having committed a figure we can't talk about in public for the Highstead appeal, an astronomical amount of money, which, we hadn't thought, oh gosh, we're going to have to spend all that money. So I haven't got much problem using some reserves, but by and large, if it weren't for that huge sum of money that we're going to have to shell out, I would be supporting a nil reserve take. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wise.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think my preference would be that we progress with this this evening, and that there is an undertaking that we do meet with all group leaders. There is still time. There's 2 weeks to go until we have full council. I am willing to make the time available if I can be helpful in making sure that we achieve a position that as many members as possible are content with, and recognising the fact that actually that may mean people tabling amendments on the night because they are the things that they want to make sure that they get through. But if we can have agreement around that, I'm happy to sort of seek that, and therefore I'm happy to second putting this through. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boyne.
Thank you, Chairman. I hear what's been said, and actually I think what Councillor Baldock has said does make sense. If the monitoring officer could, or Lisa, what's the implications? I know we have to get a budget signed and sealed and delivered by a certain date. What is that, and working that back through would be useful. That was one of the reasons why I was saying that I would be support in terms of moving it to full council. But I do hear what Councillor Baldock says, and actually I'm now of another opinion, I think, but purely from the service to the residents, we really should be working to get a budget through. My only other point is, and I have to say this, if it was either, well, it was certainly after the last budget meeting last year. I think I repeated it in July. I repeated it in September at group leaders meeting, saying for all group leaders, wouldn't it be a lot easier if all group leaders met to discuss the areas of the budget which we had commonality between us, and it was said to group leaders and the administration at the time, of which certain members were in that, were going to go away and talk about it, and I heard nothing since. So there's an element of responsibility from members of the administration, as was at the time, because frankly, they sat on their hands, and to leave it 2 weeks before a full council meeting where we're going to agree this, we could have done this a long time ago, but you chose not to.
Point of information, Chair, as obviously directed at us. We made a number of similar suggestions and got nothing back as well. So it was suggested, it never got resolved.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm not going to get involved in the whatever happened behind the coalition administration. That's for them to decide. I'm reporting on what I said and what I know to be true for myself.
Thank you. I think that's it on my list. Anybody else? Sorry, Councillor Bond.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I do have to respond to something that was said earlier. We have to shell out what is, quite frankly, an awful lot of money for Highstead Park. Obviously, I'm ward councillor, and there's various issues going on, and there's at least 2 of us who are involved in that public inquiry, which has taken up a huge amount of time. So to be lastminute.com trying to sort out a budget is fairly unsatisfactory, but some of those costs are incurred, quite frankly, because of this government and particular actions of the local MP in encouraging the Secretary of State to call that application in. Now, we would not be facing such vast costs. It is probable that they would have been significantly less. So I have to say that on the record, because it's our council taxpayers who've ended up footing the bill. It's my community, it's another member's community, 2 members, their communities who are footing the bill through voluntary donations, etc. 3, yeah. It's galling, quite frankly, and this rests solely with our elected MP for Sittingbourne and Sheppey and the government that we find ourselves shelling out these additional costs and the funding situation we find ourselves in.
Thank you. So I'll come back to the motion then. Councillor Bunn, you initially proposed it. Did you wish to withdraw that now, or you?
I'm going to withdraw mine, but yeah.
Okay, so could I have a proposal for it then? Councillor Harrison, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wise, thank you. Those in favour?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, before I did ask in terms of the dates and the drawback in terms of things. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
So there is a legal date and then there's a practical date. The legal date is the 11th of March, but practically we can't get the bills out to people by that date. So after that, that's practically impossible for us. So we set the budget at the time, because actually the 24th is about the last practical day. We have everything set up. We have customer services set up for when the bills go out, because people always have questions. So we do. So really, we can go past the 24th, but I just need to advise members there's likely to be resident dissatisfaction because the bills will be late, and sometimes that affects people, things like council tax, any sort of benefits, because people are reliant on those bills on that time, and that's something. But legally, the date we have to do is the 11th of March, and that is the the legal what we have to do. The other thing I would say is all groups have been given the opportunity to meet to discuss any amendments with the finance team or Lisa. They are done in a Chinese wall type way, so nobody else knows what anybody's amendments are. That hasn't been taken up by all parties, but that offer is still there if members want it.
Thank you. So,
Sorry, Zoe has just advised as well that would mean that we couldn't collect our first round of direct debits on the 1st of April. We would have to delay collection.
okay, thank you. So,
It depends on how quickly we move, I guess. I mean, it's still 2 weeks away. We've got, another week before the papers go out?
So if you don't agree today, then the process is we have to have another meeting. We have to give 5 days notice. That meeting, the earliest it could happen would be next Wednesday, the 12th. In order to hit Budget Council, we've got to publish on the 11th. So we do have the reserve date for Budget Council, but we don't have a reserve date after the reserve date. And unless members are confident that they can get agreement before then, you will still be in a situation. The difference between doing it, if you put amendments in on the night to get the same process, which is what happens in councils across the land, the people that put the proposals in have to identify how they're funded. So that does put the onus on people who are making amendments to understand and know how they're funded. If you have discussions, you can then agree what you're going to take out to fund things. So that might be easier, but you would have to agree what's important to one isn't important to the other to be able to fund those changes. It doesn't mean that you haven't got to fund it if you're meeting informally, but you have to be fairly certain before you go into this process that you will be able to have a consensus. And it may be that you actually think it will be easier to do that on the night, knowing that your amendments will have gone through with finance colleagues and will have been agreed as sound.
thank you. Councillor White.
Yeah, I just feel not progressing this at this meeting, all that means is we have to have another P&R meeting. It doesn't actually do anything else other than that. So if there's a willingness, which there is, to work across parties to get something that can pass on the night, that can still happen in the intermediate term. And if groups aren't happy, then obviously that's what the budget meeting's there for. Obviously, I would like us to be in a position where as many of us as possible are happy going into that meeting, but blocking this at this stage, all that means is we have to find a time to have another P&R, which could be time that we are spending as members talking to each other as adults to get something through which our residents desperately need, given the information we've just heard there about what might happen around council tax collections and notifications to people. So I'd really just urge people that I understand if people have huge reservations about this document, but there is time for us to work together on this, and blocking at this stage doesn't do anything other than all of us here will have to meet again at some point, and that's time that we could all be spending actually working together for the budget meeting itself.
Because usually, even when we do the recommendations from tonight to the first budget meeting, amendments happen in between then anyway. So the papers that go forward from here are then still subject to amendment for that first meeting. And then if we don't get to an agreed budget on that night, we have the backup budget meeting on the 24th.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, still, I hear, the good words and promises, but the only way to make sure they happen is to have another P&R. I don't particularly wish to come in for another evening, but I have experienced promises being made, good intentions, and just it never happening. So the way to ensure it is that we have to come back here and discuss revised proposals. Those revised proposals will have to have involved the other groups, so that if we get it through, then we know that there's going to be a good likelihood it will go through on the night. At the moment, you know, as I say, when you put amendments in, they're all coming from different pots. Say the Conservative group wants to, I don't know, boost appeals, planning appeals by 1 million, and they're taking it from pot X. But we want to increase playground repairs by 1 million, and we're using the same pot. If we have discussions, then it could be, okay, we'll agree you 500,000, and if you agree 500,000 from us, and then we've got the pot that will cover both. When it's all blind like this, it's easy to fall. It's easy to come up there on the night and say, oh God, we're going to use the same pot of money for them, but we agree with what they're doing. Having good, proper discussion in advance to say, this is what we would like, is there something you can give? Have we got a way forward? That means that we can get a budget that goes through. I just don't see how you can effectively do that on the night. Yeah, you can go into rooms and everything. It happened in the past. It will happen. We will get a budget through that night. I just think it'd be a lot easier if we've had a general broad agreement beforehand.
Sorry, I just need to, I was wrong in what I said, and apologies for that. The earliest we can have the meeting is not next Wednesday, because in order to have the next Wednesday, I need to publish papers, and until you've agreed what you want in those new papers, I can't publish those papers. So you would need to be certain that you can get a meeting together, and then you can give 5 days notice before that P&R, and then another 5 days notice before the full council, and therefore you are probably, it is getting incredibly close, unless you could commit to meet at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, agree by 5 o'clock so we can write the papers to get them done by, and then we have to make sure there's nothing else in the committee calendar that could take those. So I know that you're nodding, councillor, but I know a lot of our councillors work and would struggle. So that's what I'm saying is I was wrong when I said you could have it tomorrow. You could have it a week from today. Of course you can't, because I don't know what your revised proposals are. What you can, however, do is you can have an agreed set of amendments, which in effect is the same thing, but you're going to one meeting. And of course, with the greatest respect to the administration do not have a majority. So if they don't stick to their word and meet with you, you all vote against their budget, and so actually it is in their interest to follow through. I'm not saying for one moment, administration, that you wouldn't do that, but it is not in a case that they have a majority, so they can say one thing and do the other. It of course is entirely up to you, but you are going to have to be very clear with yourselves and each other about what your timelines are for meeting and getting everyone together, for getting the next P&R, and then getting the Budget Council.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Harrison, Councillor Wise and Councillor Hunt.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm missing something here. There's hundreds of councils all over this country do this. It ain't rocket science. It needs a bit of thought. We're supposed to be politicians. We're supposed to be able to think on our feet. I cannot recall one time during my time at Swale where this is, we need to get together and agree. When we were no overall control for however many years it was, we never said, oh no, let's put that off so we can have another natter. We talked all the way along anyway, but you got to that full council meeting, and some of the things which went through at the P&R, like tonight, it was, we weren't quite sure about that, so we're putting in an amendment, and you're doing an amendment on that, and you're doing an amendment on that. You've got the officers sitting there who have given financial advice to your amendments and had that Chinese wall or whatever it's called. say it ain't rocket science. It's the normal behaviour of councils up and down this country. Why do people suddenly want to be spoon-fed?
Thank you. Councillor Wise.
Yeah, I just think, thank you, Chair. I think having heard the advice there about timings from the Chief Executive, I think not proceeding with this will just hamstring us all, if that's the right word. You know, it will make it really difficult around those, the aspect then of trying to get another P&R in and everything agreed for that, when what we actually want is to work across the parties to get something in preparation for the already diarised budget meeting. That's where the ultimate decision will be taken at full council, and that's where we need to make sure that there is agreement as best as possible and consensus as best as possible across the groups. I think adding this as an added dimension will just make it much more complicated to try to say and put a shorter timescale on what is obviously going to be a process that we're all going to have to give a lot of effort into. So I just don't know how that achieves the objective, which is for all groups to have an input to make sure that they can try and get behind the budget on budget night itself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. My problem with this is the wording of the recommendations. That Policy and Resources recommends to Council to approve the administration's revenue budget proposals. Well, I can't agree with that, and I think that's what Councillor Baldock said. I think we're probably all in agreement that we meet and discuss this, but it still doesn't change what we're being asked to agree, and I say cannot agree that. It seems to me that the best thing, if possible, is to just change what the recommendations that we've got. And so it doesn't say that we have to approve to full council the administration's budget proposals. Let's have something where this wording is different, that we can agree that everyone's going to meet. We can do that now. We'll then make sure it is then put forward to full council with whatever we will agree sort of between then. But it needs a change in the wording of the recommendations that we've got so we can actually move forward with it tonight. And I was going to suggest maybe you want to adjourn the meeting, come up with some wording that we can then all agree with. It sounds good.
Good. Just before I do, Councillor Russell's been waiting patiently for a while to speak.
Just wanted to say, Chair, from the residents' point of view, who we're all doing this to support, and you know, it's their council. It's not our council; it's their council. I don't really, to speak to Larissa's point of having meetings that are, for example, very, very forced into the schedule. I only foresee that sort of thing limiting the amount of voices that are then coming back to these meetings, because councillors do have other responsibilities. It then means that, for instance, councillors who work potentially are having their voices removed from the conversation, and I don't see that as something that residents would ever support, because now more than ever, especially around budget time, it's really important to have that cross-discussion amongst ward members to make sure their residents' voices are heard. So I would rather not support additional meetings, especially when the timings of those would be not supportive of the overall goal, which is obviously having good general debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Member. So I'm now going to...
I was just a possible solution. Are we able to delegate to, rather than having another P&R, are we able to delegate to group leaders? What about then Policy and Resources recommends to Council they discuss the administration's revenue budget proposals?
Yeah, we'll take the adjournment and give you a chance for a cigarette. Oh, apologies. He'll give our officers a chance to provide an amendment.
Have the group leaders here to agree the wording, that would help.
Okay, right, that's fine, yeah.
So Monique can go for your cigarette for you.
You can delegate it to someone.
Yeah, you can delegate it.
So